It started again this summer, 3 headlines, 3 losses in the space of a single month, July 2025. A vacation turned to tragedy when Malcolm Jamal Warner drowned at age 54, lost to a powerful current in Costa Rica. Then 2 days later, the world's Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, 76, succumbs to a sudden heart attack. And before the headlines could even cool, wrestling superstar Hulk Hogan, 71, fell victim to an acute myocardial infarction. 3 legends, 3 different worlds, television, music, and sports entertainment. Yet somehow the headlines link them together, all of them dead. Then, like clockwork, social media began to chatter the infamous words, "They come in threes." Comment sections filled with people whispering that phrase like superstition, halfway joking, half possibility. But this idea isn't new. In fact, the entire belief, the one that makes us hold our breath after the second celebrity dies, can be traced back more than 60 years. February 3rd, 1959, a small charter plane crashed outside Clear Lake, Iowa. On board were rock legends Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson. 3 young stars gone in a single instant. The stunned nation called it the day the music died. It was a tragedy, but for a shocked nation trying to make sense of the disaster, it was also a pattern. A neat, grim equation that made unbearable loss feel organized. From that day on, the public started counting. Every time 2 famous names passed close together, we waited for the third. Every time the third came, the pattern felt complete, almost psychologically satisfying, like the universe had finished its sentence. Psychologists call it apophenia, the human urge to find meaning in randomness. It's how we turn chaos into stories, and in pop culture, death in threes became the ultimate story structure. Beginning, middle, and end. So when July 2025 gave us Malcolm, Ozzy, and Hulk Hogan, it wasn't just grief, it was deja vu, a superstition replaying itself generation after generation. Tonight we unravel the ancient rhythm behind the "they come in threes" mythos, the symbols, the stories, the psychology, and the many times we saw in real time how pop culture died in eerie patterns. From birth to death, we are surrounded by threes. Every story we've ever told follows it, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every belief system, every myth, every ritual folds itself neatly into it. In Christianity, the divine is expressed in a trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. 3 beings in one, symbolizing creation, sacrifice, and renewal. The holy cycle repeats endlessly: life, death, resurrection. In ancient Greece, that same rhythm took a darker form. The Greeks called them the Moirai, or more famously, the Fates. They were 3 sisters who controlled every human life. Clotho, the spinner, who wove the thread of existence, symbolizing birth and the beginning of all things. Lachesis, the measurer, who determined how long that thread would run, the quiet hand deciding the span of a person's life. And Atropos, the inflexible one, who cut the thread with her shears, ending life when the pattern was complete. Together, they represented the entire human story: creation, duration, and cessation, a perfect trinity of inevitability. Their decisions could not be bargained with or undone. Even Zeus himself bowed to their will. And in Celtic lore, the same triad reappears as the triple goddess, maiden, mother, crone. She embodies youth, maturity, and wisdom, the phases of womanhood, and the endless turning of time. Even in witchcraft and superstition, 3 is sacred, powerful enough to summon or banish, depending on who speaks it. Say a name 3 times in the mirror, and something answers back. Knock 3 times to ward off bad luck. Light 3 candles, make 3 wishes, repeat 3 prayers, etc. Somewhere along the way, 3 stopped being a number and became a ritual. But there's a reason it feels that way. A reason the number 3 seems to anchor the human mind. Psychologists call it the triadic principle. The brain naturally organizes chaos into groups of three. 3 points make a line, 3 beats make a rhythm. It's the smallest pattern that feels complete. That's why we say ready, set, go. Why stories unfold in 3 acts. Why jokes land on the 3rd punchline. Our brains crave it. They're built for it. From infancy, humans learn by rhythm, repetition, and closure. The 3rd beat tells the brain, you can stop searching. The pattern is complete, and that craving for completion doesn't stop with stories or songs. It reaches into grief itself. When 1 person dies, it's tragedy. When 2 die, it's coincidence. But when the 3rd name falls, the pattern locks in. The pain is still there, but it suddenly feels explainable. Like the universe isn't cruel, it's following rules. That's the quiet comfort behind. They come in 3s. Psychologists call it the illusion of control, the mind's way of reducing anxiety when the world feels unpredictable. We can't stop death. But if we can count it, we can convince ourselves it has structure. This neural wiring that drives this illusion also fuels lucky charms, prayers, and ritual repetition, what researchers call magical thinking. Neuroscientists have traced part of this response to the anterior cingulate cortex, the region that detects conflict and broken patterns. When events feel random, that area lights up like an alarm. But once a 3rd loss completes the sequence, the signal calms. The brain reads it as resolved. So 3 becomes a kind of psychological anesthetic. It gives chaos shape. It gives mourning a rhythm. It lets us tuck the unexplainable into a pattern we can live with. Maybe that's why the number 3 appears in everything. From holy trinities to fairy tale curses, it mirrors the circuitry of our own minds. It's order in chaos, meaning in loss. And every time the pattern repeats, from the crash that killed Buddy Holly to the summer that took Warner, Osborne, and Hogan, it doesn't just echo through headlines. It echoes through us. Because what we fear most isn't necessarily death itself. It's not understanding it. And in the language of human psychology, 3 is how we make sense of the senseless. In Hollywood, death is never just death. It's timing, it's headlines, it's narrative. The moment one legend passes, the countdown begins. The public waits, holding its collective breath for the 2nd and then the 3rd. It's not written anywhere, yet everyone knows the rule. The media doesn't create the pattern, but it confirms it. The 2nd name drops, and the headlines shift from mourning to math. 2 gone this week, the folks start to say. Who will be the 3rd? Suddenly, the tragedy becomes a trilogy that everyone gets to gossip about, to get their minds off the fear and sadness of losing these people that we tied ourselves to. Here are some of the most famous cases of celebrity death in 3s. June of 2009 saw Hollywood lose 3 of its most beloved icons, each one representing a different corner of American entertainment. It began with Ed McMahon, the legendary television personality and longtime sidekick to Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. For decades, Ed's booming laughter and warmth filled living rooms across America. But on June 23, 2009, after years of declining health and financial troubles that played out publicly, Ed passed away quietly in Los Angeles at the age of 86. 2 days later, on June 25th, the world would lose not 1, but 2 icons within hours of each other. Farrah Fawcett, America's Golden Girl and star of Charlie's Angels, died at 62 after a long, painful battle with cancer. Her courage and vulnerability during her illness were documented in her final years, turning her fight into one of Hollywood's most human moments. And just hours after the world began mourning Farrah, news broke that stopped time. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was dead at 50 after suffering cardiac arrest in his Los Angeles home. The streets filled with mourners, the internet froze, a generation wept. 3 icons gone within 72 hours, the host, the angel, and the king, The narrative was instant. The rule of three strikes again. Television, film, and music silenced in perfect, eerie sequence. For millions, it felt like more than coincidence. It felt like the universe was closing a chapter. January 2016 opened with a sense of loss that felt almost biblical, as if the new year was already grieving. It began with David Bowie, the chameleon of music, who reinvented himself through every era and genre. He died on January 10th, 2016, just 2 days after releasing his final album, Black Star, a record now seen as a parting gift, filled with lyrics that sounded eerily like a farewell. Just days later, fans were still reeling when the world lost another legend of a different art form, Alan Rickman, the actor known for his unforgettable voice and roles that defined an era. From Die Hard to Harry Potter, Rickman embodied elegance and menace in equal measure. He died on January 14, 2016, after a quiet battle with cancer known only to his closest friends. And then came René Angélil, the husband and lifelong manager of Celine Dion, whose belief in her talent helped shape one of the greatest voices of all time. René passed on January 14th, the very same day as Rickman, after years of fighting throat cancer, just 2 days shy of his 74th birthday. Three powerful figures, an artist, an actor, a visionary, gone within the same week. By mid-January, the world was whispering again, "They come in threes." But 2016 wasn't finished. In April 2016 felt like déjà vu. The year had already opened in mourning, Bowie, Rickman, René, three gone in January. But spring brought another pattern, another set of names, another countdown to the third. It began with Doris Roberts, the veteran actress, best known as Marie Barone, on Everybody Loves Raymond. She'd spent 6 decades on stage and screen, beloved for her sharp humor and soft heart. On April 17th, 2016, Doris passed away peacefully in her Los Angeles home at age 90. Her death felt natural, gentle, but it would soon become the first note in a darker chord. Just 1 day later, the wrestling world was shaken by news that China, real name Joan Marie Lurker, had been found dead in her apartment in Redondo Beach. She was 46. Once hailed as the 9th wonder of the world, China had broken barriers in a male-dominated sport. But life after fame had been turbulent. Battles with addiction, isolation, and the haunting weight of forgotten celebrity. The coroner later confirmed her death as an accidental overdose of prescription drugs. And then, just 2 days later, April 21st, 2016, came the shock that stopped the world again. Prince, the artist who'd blurred every line between genres, genders, and generations, found alone inside his Paisley Park estate, dead at 57 from an accidental fentanyl overdose. Minneapolis turned violet. Fans poured into the streets singing Purple Rain through tears. 3 losses in 5 days. Television, wrestling, and music gone in a single week. The headlines repeated what people already whispered. They come in threes. By summer, that phrase had become a kind of cultural reflex, a nervous mantra for a year that wouldn't stop taking. January 2022, a new year but the same haunting rhythm. It began with Sidney Poitier, the man who broke Hollywood's color line and redefined what dignity looked like on screen. The first black man to win an Academy Award for Best Actor, Lilies of the Field, 1964. To millions, he wasn't just an actor. He was a symbol of possibility. On January 6, 2022, at the age of 94, Poitier passed away at his home in Beverly Hills. For a moment, the world stopped to honor him, a life of quiet revolution. Then, just 3 days later, came Bob Saget, America's TV dad. Known for Full House and America's Funniest Home Videos, Saget's humor shaped an entire generation. But off-camera, he was sharp, self-deprecating, and deeply human. On January 9th, 2022, he was found dead in his Florida hotel room after a stand-up show. The cause? blunt head trauma from an accidental fall. He was 65. And as the public was still reeling from those two names, the third arrived, fashion icon Andre Leon Talley. The towering figure of Vogue magazine, Talley was a bridge between worlds, couture and culture, elegance and rebellion. On January 18th, 2022, at 73, he passed away in White Plains, New York, after years of health complications. Poitier, Saget, Talley, three vastly different lives, united by timing and legacy. Acting, comedy, fashion, three pillars of American pop culture, silenced within days of one another. And once again, the pattern emerged. Three names, one after another, neatly tied by superstition and sorrow. The whispers returned. They come in threes. By now, the pattern had become something deeper than myth, a mirror of how we process loss and how we turn chaos into story. So what is it about celebrity deaths that makes us start counting? Why do we wait for the third name before we can breathe again? To understand that, we have to look past the headlines and into the psychology behind it. Psychologists call this pattern completion bias. When we see the first two parts of a familiar sequence, our minds automatically search for the third, even if it doesn't exist yet. The media's endless coverage fuels that bias, turning coincidence into cosmic symmetry. But there's another reason we cling to these celebrity clusters: collective grief. When a famous figure dies, millions of people mourn together. But human beings don't process mass grief well. Our brains are built for small tribes, not global goodbyes. So we compartmentalize. We group our losses into patterns, lists, and categories to make them emotionally digestible. The rule of three gives that grief an outline. It becomes something we can measure rather than something we drown in. News outlets unintentionally reinforce it, packaging deaths into trios, highlighting coincidences, and turning randomness into ritual. And soon, the pattern stops feeling coincidental at all. It starts feeling inevitable. Because if death has a rhythm, we don't have to fear it, we can predict it. And prediction feels like power. In truth, these patterns don't exist outside our perception. But in a world built on screens, timelines, and trending hashtags, perception is reality. The rule of three became Hollywood's unspoken religion, not because the stars themselves believed in it, but because we needed to. It was our way of writing endings for people we never wanted to lose. And every time the cycle repeats, it reminds us of one thing. In the entertainment world, the final act always comes in threes. Every time it happens, three names, three losses, people say the same thing. See, it's proof. But proof of what exactly? A curse, fate, or just the way our minds bend chaos into stories that comfort us? Statistically, more than 150,000 people die every day around the world. When you add fame, coincidence is inevitable. The law of large numbers guarantees that several public figures will die within days or weeks of each other. It's not pattern, it's probability. But we're not wired to think in probabilities, we think in narratives. Cognitive scientists call it apophenia, the instinct to find meaningful connections in random data. It's what makes us see faces in clouds or shapes in static. In the 1950s, psychologist Klaus Conrad used the word to describe the earliest signs of delusional thinking, the moment the brain starts connecting dots that were never meant to touch. But for most of us, apophenia isn't delusion. It's defense. It's how we protect ourselves from uncertainty, because randomness is terrifying. If death is random, it means there's no reason, no pattern, no way to prepare. So instead, we make patterns. We turn grief into geometry. Psychologists say this is also tied to what's called the availability heuristic, our tendency to overestimate how often something happens based on how easily we can recall it. When three celebrity deaths happen close together, the media floods every screen with their faces. So the cluster feels enormous, as if the world suddenly lost balance. But if those same deaths happen weeks apart, most of us wouldn't even notice the pattern. It's the proximity, the closeness in time, that tricks the brain into seeing connection where none exists. That's also why we forget the times when the rule doesn't work, the months when one or two famous people die and nothing else happens. Our memory edits out the gaps. The pattern survives because we only remember the hits, not the misses. It's what scientists call confirmation bias, the brain's selective attention to evidence that supports what it already believes. So when two famous deaths happen close together, our subconscious starts hunting for a third, scanning headlines, holding its breath, waiting for the prophecy to fulfill itself. The rule of three becomes self-sustaining, not because it's real, but because belief makes it real enough. Statistically, there's nothing mystical about it, but psychologically, it's powerful. It gives the unexplainable shape and the unbearable symmetry. And that's the paradox. The more random life feels, the more order we invent. Maybe that's the real science of coincidence, not about who dies, but about how we need it to make sense. Every culture builds patterns to survive the unthinkable. In some, death is a door, in others, a cycle. But for us, it's a headline, a countdown that ends at 3. We don't whisper they come in threes because we believe in curses. We whisper it because we believe in balance. 3 turns chaos into story. It gives lost rhythm, a beginning, a middle, and an end. But beneath that comfort is something darker, our refusal to face the truth that life doesn't obey patterns at all. Psychologists call it terror management theory, the idea that human beings build systems of meaning to buffer themselves against the fear of mortality. Religion, fame, legacy, even superstition, they're all ways of saying, I will not disappear into randomness. The rule of 3 works the same way. It's not a curse we're trapped in. It's a story we wrote to make death feel symmetrical. Because if tragedy has rhythm, then maybe it isn't chaos. Maybe it's choreography. But the truth is, life doesn't count for us. It doesn't tally the fallen in sets of 3. We do that. We build meaning out of coincidence the same way ancient civilizations mapped gods into the stars. Not because they were there, but because we needed them to be. It's our most human reflex to turn fear into pattern, and pattern into peace. So when we scroll through headlines and see that familiar trilogy of names, maybe it isn't death that's repeating. Maybe it's us, our endless need to make the random beautiful, to give chaos a rhythm we can live with. Because deep down, we don't want randomness. We want reason. And in a world that rarely gives us either, the rule of 3 becomes our lullaby, a way of saying that even in loss, there's still some order left in the universe. Maybe that's why every time it happens, every time the third name drops and the timeline goes silent, the world exhales, whispers, it's complete, and starts waiting all over again. They say death comes in threes. Maybe it does. Or maybe it's just the way we count our grief, one loss at a time until we can finally make it make sense. For generations, we've turned tragedy into pattern and chaos into closure, because the alternative, that life ends without reason or rhythm, is too heavy to carry. So we group the names together, the way we group stars into constellations. And maybe that's the real story. Not the curse, not the coincidence, but the pattern of our need. The way we chase logic through loss. The way we can't stand the thought of randomness, so we build rhythm around it. Because deep down, we're not afraid of dying. We're afraid of not understanding why. So we count, we connect, we repeat, and the world keeps turning, 3 beats at a time. So lurkers, what do you think? Do you truly believe that death comes in threes? Or do you think it's done to make us feel better about loss? Can you think of any more celebrities who died in threes? Let me know down below.